بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا من سيئات أعمالنا من يهد الله فهو المهتد ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. Inshallah, for today's khutbah, I'd like to focus on something that I think is very relevant to all of our lives, and to do it, there's going to be a series of stories, inshallah. But what I want us to try and do today is put ourselves in the shoes of those people and in the places of those people. And the reality of all of our lives is that everyone struggles with something. It might be that you're struggling financially, you may be working 2-3 jobs and not keeping up. It may be that you're struggling with your kids, or kids struggling with your parents. Or it may be that we have problems in our family structure, problems in our workplace, or problems in the way that we're treated outside the home or inside the home. And these are all things that people time and time again have been faced with from generation to generation. And inshallah, I'd like to focus on what that means for us in this world and what that means in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And to start us off, I'd like to talk about when the Rasul alayhi salatu wasalam would bleed from his injuries. He would hold his blood and he would say, I fear that if a drop of my blood should fall upon the earth, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would envelop them in a punishment. So you think about my Prophet and your Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, holding on to the blood that was dripping from him because of what his enemies would do. But he would hold on to it, saying that he doesn't want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to punish the people that did it to him. Because we know that the ground trembles when innocent blood is shed on the earth. And even when he was struck, he would pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't punish those that hit him. And after the battle of Uhud, in a very famous story, after all the events that he had seen, Allahumma salli wa sallam barik alayhi wa alihi, and we know that there were a lot of Muslims lost on that day, including his uncle Hamza, radiallahu anh, who was one of the closest people in the world to Rasul alayhi salatu salam. And you have to remember that the Rasul alayhi salatu salam was an orphan, so he didn't have a lot of family, and he didn't have a lot of people close to him. So Hamza was a pillar in his life. And Hamza was someone so respected in society that a lot of what they did to the Rasul ﷺ was watered down because they knew that Hamza would protect him. So this was a huge person in his life. And I want you to think about someone in your life that has that relationship with you, or that you have that relationship with. And now imagine that you lose that person, but on top of losing them, imagine you lose them in a way that's indescribable. And that we know that they mutilated his body, and that they ate his liver after they killed him. And they did this all in front of the Rasul alayhi salatu salam. So you think of someone that's already had a hard life leading up to that point, and then he has to witness an event like that. And on that day, one of the Sahaba came up and he said, pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala against them, Ya Rasulullah. And for those of you that have lost someone close, you know what it feels like to have that hate and anger in your heart when it was something done in injustice. So you say, pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala against them, Ya Rasulullah. And then he said, I wasn't sent as a cursor nor as a speaker of evil. Rather, I was sent with the pure religion. And then he raised his hands to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and he said, Ya Allah, guide my people, for verily they do not know. And on that day, one of his companions cursed Quraysh. And the Rasul ﷺ told him, don't curse Quraysh. And then the man replied, but I only curse them for what they did to you, Ya Rasulullah, for what they have done. And the Rasul ﷺ said, you'll see from them those who will do such and such good. And they used to say that when he was wronged, and you think about this now again, think about when we're wronged, when someone does something to us that wrongs us. They said that he never used to get angry and he never used to seek revenge for himself. But then it was said that if someone else was wronged, if injustice was done to someone else, that there was nothing in this world that could stop him from getting that person's right. And nothing in this world would stand in front of him until that person was given the right. So the lesson isn't to be pushovers, but to fight the right battles. And to have that collectedness that the Rasul ﷺ had. And in another story, it's narrated that after about 11 years of preaching and teaching Islam, the Prophet ﷺ went through some very difficult circumstances. And just to put it in perspective for you, to get it up to that point, when he was 40 years old, he was visited by Jibreel ﷺ, and he was given the first verses of the religion. And then it went on for 3 years, and he only shared the message with the people that were closest to him. So his family, his loved ones, people like Khadija, Ali ibn Abi Talib, Abu Bakr, Zayd ibn Haritha, radiallahu anhum ajma'een. These are the people that he shared the message with in the beginning. These were the people that supported him. Then the Rasul ﷺ is instructed to take the message to the public and to start preaching to the people of Mecca. But as a result, and we all know this story very well, he's met with a lot of backlash. He wasn't met with open arms the way you would hope that you are. There was a strong response to his message because it went against the way that they lived their lives, the core values that they lived by, that Rasul ﷺ was preaching against. And so it goes on to arguing, to name-calling, to belittling, and then it grows to slander, and finally to violence and aggression, to the point where there was open persecution and torture against the Rasul ﷺ and the Sahaba. And so the Prophet ﷺ is attacked multiple times with continuous assassination attempts. And this goes on for 4 years until it reaches a peak. And so continue to think about what this person is living through. Think about yourself being in that situation, that you go from being someone who's so respected, someone who everyone called Al-Amin, the trustworthy, because of how much they respected him, to being called a liar, to being belittled, to not having, you already don't have that many people in your life, but the people that you do have are being tortured, are being dragged by horseback in the streets, are being strung up. And you're seeing all this happening in front of you because you're trying to do something good. Not because you're trying to do something wrong, but because you're trying to do something good for the people. And finally, the Rasul ﷺ reaches the next phase of prophethood, and he's outcast, he's boycotted, and he's completely cut off from everybody. And anyone who followed him got the same treatment. And this lasted for 3 years. So now we're talking about 10 years of hardship. And it's hard to understand because we're condensing it into a few minutes in a beautiful masjid, mashallah, with safety and AC and everything that we could possibly imagine. So trying to understand their situation is difficult. But nevertheless, it's something that we should reflect on. So now they're in this mode where they've been boycotted and cut off. And here's where I want you to again try to think about what this means for them. So if they were a gathering like this, what kind of circle they were sitting in. And there were many narrations of them going to sleep with babies crying because they didn't have food to feed them. And they had to bury so many of their loved ones because so many of them died from not having any sustenance or nutrition, from having disease widespread. And there was so much suffering and sacrifice, and after that ended, after this 10-year period, something else happened. And so imagine where the Rasul ﷺ is at this point after this 10-year period of non-stop testing. Because we're not talking, alhamdulillah, a lot of times in our lives, we'll maybe get it for a year, 2 years, a few months, and then there's an ease that comes. But he's continuing to be pushed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then when you think that he's at the top of his story, when relief is going to come, he loses his uncle. And this is huge because his uncle was like his father. This is the man that raised him, right? The father of Ali ibn Abi Talib. He raised him and took care of him like his father. And on top of that, he also loses his wife Khadija, radiallahu anha, who had been with him and supported him since the first day of the message. That after he got the message, he ran to her and said, Zamiluni, Zamiluni, cover me. So now for those of you that are married, think about your wife who's with you through every step of the way, no matter what the struggle you go through in life is. But you're not going through it alone because you have your wife backing you up. She's with you. She's by your side. Now imagine losing that person, but you're not just losing her, you're losing her at the end of this 10-year period. And so this all happened back to back to back, and then word gets out to Mecca that all this happens. And I don't need to tell you guys the way of the world. You know how this story goes. You think the people of Mecca said, okay, haram, give him a break, miskeen, he's been through a tough time. We should let off a little bit. But they took advantage of it. They said, now we can hit him when he's weak. And so they push even harder. And finally, at this point, the Rasul ﷺ starts to look outside of Mecca. Okay, he said, you know what, I love this city and I love my home and I was raised here, but I can't stay here anymore. The situation's getting too difficult. And the Quran mentions the two major cities of Arabia at the time, and it wasn't Mecca and Medina, as you might think, but it was Ta'if and Medina. And so Ta'if had a power that rivaled Quraysh. They had very strong men, they had strong people, and they were a wealthy city, they were well off. So Rasulullah looks to Ta'if. And now, just to put it in context, he's been through 11 years of hardship, and he's past 50 years old. So you're not talking about someone who's being tested in his 20s or 30s. You're talking about someone who's in his 50s, going through all these tests that are coming his way. And so he goes to Ta'if, and Ta'if is about 60 miles from Mecca. And the Prophet ﷺ makes his journey on foot, and it was only two people. It was him and his devout companion, his adopted son in a way, Zayd ibn Haritha. And just the two of them walked the desert non-stop for 4 days. And they didn't do it by horseback, and they didn't do it by camel, but they did it by foot. So imagine you're at the end of this period, or this test that you've gone through, and now as a last resort effort, you make your way to Ta'if, where you hope that maybe that's going to be your break. And the Rasul ﷺ never did anything without strategy. So he thinks, I'm here at the city, I'm going to go to the leader of this tribe and make myself known to the leader. And at the time, there were 3 brothers who were the sons of the leader in Ta'if, and they were the ones that he was to talk to. So he tried to talk to them a few days over and over again. They kept pushing him off. And then finally, one of them said, he looks at him and he says, really, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, God couldn't find anyone else to make a prophet. That's the result he got from the first one. And then the second one calls him a liar to his face. He looks at him, he says, you're a liar. And then the third one said, I don't even want to talk to you, because if I do, and you're a prophet, I'm going to get myself into trouble. I'm not trying to mess with a prophet. But then he said, if you're not, and you're a liar, I don't want to get myself involved with a liar. So you see the kinds of people that he has to deal with. And then he said, I'm fine with the way things are, there's nothing to talk about, and he pushes them away. And the Rasul ﷺ was never someone to be pushy. He was never someone that was in your face, that was annoying. He said they want to talk to him, so he said, Khalas, okay, we don't have to talk, there's nothing left to say, so he turns. Then he tries his luck with the people. He says, maybe the leadership won't understand, maybe the leadership is comfortable with the way things are, but maybe the people will understand. So he goes and he tries to talk to the people, unfortunately only to find that they're the same way. So finally, and this is around the 10th day, they send a couple of representatives to talk to the Rasul ﷺ. And he tells them, and they tell him that you need to leave. The people of Ta'if want to send this message to you, "Ukhruj min biladina." You need to leave our town. And the Rasul ﷺ says, okay, I get the message, no problem. And he looks at Zayd ibn Haritha and he says, pack our bags, let's go. There's nothing left here. So they pack up and they start to leave Ta'if, and then some of the people of the city decide that they're not just going to let him leave. And this is the point where remember again what he's been through and where he's at. At this point in his life, we're not talking about one event. We're talking about this is the last percent on top of the 99% that had already happened. This is just the end of it. And for those of you that have been tested, and everyone here has, you know that it's a lot different when it's an isolated event versus something that's the end or the last straw, or they say it was the straw that broke the camel's back. So he decides he's going to leave the city, and there's only one way or one road out of the city. And the people of Ta'if, they gathered the men and they lined up the road. And every single one of them had a pile of rocks that he took with him. So they piled the road, and then as he's walking, the narration says that every time he lifted his foot, they threw rocks at him. And every time his foot came down, they threw more rocks at him. And it was everybody throwing from both sides. It wasn't a couple people or from one area. And so, and a lot of narrations say that they even aimed at his feet so that he wouldn't be able to walk anymore, so that he'd have to crawl out. And he didn't curse anyone, and he didn't fight anyone. And he just starts to move faster and faster. And then finally, about 3 miles outside of Ta'if, and imagine walking this 3-mile walk. Zayd ibn Haritha says that he would jump in the way of the rocks coming at him to try and block the Rasul, to the point where they hit him in the head. And the wound to his head was so severe that the Rasul ﷺ pushed him away. And he said, "You're going to kill yourself if you keep doing this." And he described the Rasul as having blood all over his body, to the point where even his sandals changed color because of how much they had hit him. And so they reach a point where the people of Ta'if finally got tired. So think about this. They got tired of throwing rocks at him. So they finally turn around and decide they're going to go home. And at this point, the Rasul ﷺ was still standing. He didn't fall, he didn't break, but he was still standing there after all this had happened. And now remember, he's standing there in his 50s. This is a grown, respectable elder now. We're not talking about someone who's young and this is the beginning. So finally, he stands there, he looks up at the sky, and then he begins to make dua. So the first lesson in this is, when we're at that point of our life, when we're at the lowest point, when you feel like you just can't put up with it anymore. We've all been in that situation. The first lesson he teaches us is that you look up to the sky and put your hands up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he says, "Ya Allah, only to you do I complain about my weakness. And only to you, Ya Allah, am I here complaining about my own lack of resources. And only to you, Ya Allah, am I here complaining about my lack of respect in the eyes of the people. It's my fault they don't respect me, Ya Arhamar Rahimin." And he says, "Ya Allah, you are the Lord, the Master, the Creator, the Sustainer, the Provider, the Caretaker of all those who are weak and oppressed and abused and beaten. Wa anta Rabbi, and you're my Lord and my Master. Ya Allah, do you hand me over to someone who is void of any mercy? To someone who has no compassion? Will you hand me over to my enemies and give them full control over me?" And then he says, "Even if that be the case, Ya Allah," he says, "even if that's the case, as long as you're not angry with me, فَلَا أُبَالِي, as long as you're not upset with me, I don't care about anything else. The only thing I need, Ya Allah, is your forgiveness, mercy, and protection." And then he says, and think about this part of it. He's not complaining to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying, "You did this to me." He's not complaining about his situation. But he complains about his own inability and his own circumstance. His own lack of being able to do good. And then he says, "Just please don't let all this have been happening because you're upset with me. If it's going to happen, let it happen. Just don't be upset with me." And then he says, "Ya Allah, I take refuge in the light and the nur of your face that removes all layers upon layers of darkness. that could fix everything in this life and the next. And then he says, Ya Allah, protect me from your anger and your punishment and your wrath of ever taking hold of me. And then he says, لَكَ الْعُطْبَى حَتَّى تَرْضَى. Everything is done only for you and your sake until you're pleased, Ya Allah. وَلَا حَوْلَ وَلَا قُوَّةَ إِلَّا بِاللَّهِ. And this was the dua of the Prophet ﷺ. And this is where he's showing us a practical role in our lives. So no matter what state that you're in, no matter whether or not you're in a place where you don't pray anymore, or you're in a place that you don't practice anymore, but all of us know the hate and the anger that comes to us in those circumstances. All of us know what that feeling feels like. No one is different in that. But he's teaching us how to deal with it. And you all know, and you've seen this over and over again, for example, in the United States, a lot of their problems, and alhamdulillah, I've been able to work with a lot of youth, both Muslim and non-Muslim. And a lot of their issues come from not knowing how to deal with their problems. So when they tell you that you go to the bar and drink your problems away, or smoke your problems away, or do whatever it is that people do, that doesn't make the problem go away. It just makes people forget about it until they're back to reality, and then they remember again. And then it's a never-ending cycle. And there is no solution other than the solution to turn back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I say this advice for me above anyone else. Because this is the only time that you'll ever feel peace in your heart. Otherwise, you'll always be in that state of anger, in that state of hate, or in that state of revenge. So he sits down, and then Jibreel alayhi salam comes, and we all know this part of the story. And he comes to him with the angel of the mountains. And he says, Ya Rasulullah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has heard your dua. And upon your command, we can take these two mountains and crush the city of Ta'if. There will be no remains of the people ever even having existed here. And then the Rasul ﷺ says, no, I have no ill intention toward these people. He says, I don't want to see them destroyed. I want to see them embrace the message. And if not, then from them down the road, I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings forth people from them that will do such and such good. And will come to guidance and recognition. And so what's the wisdom of this story one last time? Him turning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala removed the anger. It removed the hate towards those people. And this is the thing that I pray inshallah we're able to apply in our own lives. And that we're able to find the same peace. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على رسول الكريم. I'd like to end with this last story about a donkey and a farmer that maybe you've heard before. So this farmer sees that his donkey is stuck in the well. It fell into the well, and he goes and he starts to call his neighbors. And they try over and over again to get him out, and they just can't do it. So finally, this donkey was older in age. They decide that we can't leave him in there to die slowly. So they decide to bury him. And they figure that that's the best way to put him out of his misery. So they all bring shovels and they all start to shovel dirt into the well. And while the dirt is hitting the donkey's back, he starts to scream. Because subhanAllah, for those of you that own any animals, you know that a lot of times they understand the situation that they're in. So the donkey starts to scream because he's afraid. And so the donkey hits his back and falls to the ground underneath him. And then eventually the farmer hears the donkey stop screaming. He stops yelling. And so the farmer looks inside the well and he sees that the dirt is hitting his back, he's shaking it off, and then he's stepping on top of it. And he's doing this over and over and over again until he gets out of the well. So what's the moral of the story? If he had stood there and let it happen, it would have happened to him. But he didn't. And all these tests Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts in our lives are the same way. Everyone here has an ideal image of who they want to be in their life, or who they always dreamed of being, or the kind of husband or father or wife or sister or brother or friend that they want to be. But that doesn't just come from us sitting there not doing anything. And when we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us those people, He'll make us those people. But He makes us through these tests. And there's a really beautiful quote by Imam Ali where he says, I asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for strength, and Allah gave me difficulties to make me strong. Then I asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for wisdom, and Allah gave me problems to solve. And I asked Allah for courage, and Allah gave me obstacles to overcome. And I asked Allah for love, and Allah gave me troubled people to help. I asked Allah for favors, and Allah gave me opportunities. Maybe I received nothing I wanted, but I received everything that I needed. And so we need to realize that those are also our circumstances. Nothing in this life is going to come easy, but it's all relative to how we see things. So if we're able to shake it off our back and to make the best of it, we'll become those people, inshallah. And I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes us everything that we wanted to be in the eyes of our children, in the eyes of our parents. And that we're from those that He's proud of, that stand proud on the Day of Judgment. Forgive me for anything that I said that was wrong, that was from me. And if I upset anyone, please forgive me. That wasn't my intention. Anything right was from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم اهدنا فيمن هديت وعافنا فيمن عافيت تولنا فيمن توليت وبارك لنا فيما أعطيت وقنا شر ما قضيت إنك تقضي سبحانك ولا يقضى عليك تباركت ربنا وتعاليت لك الحمد على ما قضيت ولك الشكر على ما أعطيت نستغفرك اللهم من جميع الذنوب والخطايات ونتوب إليك نسألك اللهم رضاك والجنة نسألك اللهم رضاك والجنة نسألك اللهم رضاك والجنة اللهم هذا الدعاء منك الإجابة وهذا الجهد عليك التكلان سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين